The evacuation sirens wailed across the medical station as enemy vessels darkened the horizon of Kepler 7. Dr. Marcus Kane pressed, his hands against the chest wound of a Valoran soldier before him, watching purple blood seep between his fingers. Around him, his alien colleagues frantically packed equipment and deleted sensitive data from their terminals. "Marcus, we have to go." Dr. Tala, his Centaurian partner, shouted over the chaos. Her 6 arms moved in practiced efficiency, sealing medical supplies into portable containers. "The last transport leaves in 10 minutes. Marcus didn't look up from his patient. The young Valoran's breathing was shallow, each breath a struggle against the shrapnel lodged near his primary heart. "I can't leave him. He won't survive the journey in this condition. He won't survive the bombardment either." Tala's voice cracked with desperation. "The hegemony forces will be here within the hour. This is a medical station. They'll destroy everything." The Valoran's eyes fluttered open, meeting Marcus's gaze. In that moment, something passed between them, a recognition of shared mortality, of the universal need for compassion in the face of annihilation. The alien's hand, weak and trembling, reached up to touch Marcus's arm. "Go," the soldier whispered in broken standard. "Save ... yourself." Marcus shook his head firmly. "I took an oath. All life is sacred." He turned to Tala, who was backing toward the exit with the last of their team. "Get out of here. That's an order." "Marcus, please, go." Tala hesitated at the threshold, her large eyes glistening with unshed tears. "The galaxy needs more healers." "Like you," she said softly, then disappeared into the corridor. The station fell silent except for the distant rumble of approaching ships and the steady beep of medical equipment. Marcus worked with methodical precision, his hands steady despite the circumstances. He removed the shrapnel piece by piece, cauterized the bleeding vessels, and administered synthetic plasma to replace what was lost. Every great bond starts with a single moment of courage. HFY Chronicle Stories is just beginning, and your support matters. If you love emotional sci-fi tales, forbidden connections, and stories that stay with you, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us bring more stories from the stars to you. Hours passed. Marcus had moved 3 other critical patients to the emergency bunker beneath the medical bay, jury-rigging life support systems with spare parts and determination. When the first explosions rocked the station, he was still working, still fighting for lives that others had written off as acceptable losses. The hegemony forces found him there 12 hours later, covered in alien blood but still standing guard over his patients. The assault team leader, a towering reptilian creature with scales like obsidian armor, paused at the sight of the lone human. "You stayed," the commander said, his voice a low rumble of confusion and something that might have been respect. Marcus raised his hand slowly, showing he was unarmed. "I'm a medic. These beings need care." The commander studied him for a long moment, then gestured to his troops. "Secure the area. This one is ... interesting." As they led him away, Marcus caught sight of the Valoran soldier he'd saved. The alien was conscious now, watching with wide eyes as his savior was taken prisoner. Their eyes met one final time, and Marcus saw something he'd never expected to see in an enemy's gaze. Gratitude. The station burned behind them, but something new had been born in its ashes, a legend that would spread through the stars. The hegemony. Prison ship Deathclaw was a monument to suffering, its corridors echoing with the cries of 1,000 captured souls. Marcus had been aboard for 6 standard months, his medical skills making him valuable enough to keep alive, but dangerous enough to watch constantly. His cell was barely large enough for a human to lie down, but Marcus had learned to find peace in the smallest spaces. He spent his days treating injured prisoners through the bars, using torn fabric and salvaged materials to fashion bandages and splints. The guards allowed it because healthy prisoners worked better in the labor camps. Human, A gravelly voice called from the cell across the narrow corridor. Marcus looked up to see Kor, a massive Kraxi warrior whose forearms bore the ritual scars of 100 battles. The young one in Cell 7 grows worse. Marcus nodded, gathering his meager supplies. Cell 7 housed a teenage Altarian who'd been captured during a refugee transport raid. The boy had been declining for days, his crystalline skin losing its natural luminescence, a sure sign of organ failure in his species. Working through the bars was challenging, but Marcus had developed techniques over the months. He pressed his hands against the boy's chest, feeling the irregular rhythm of his dual hearts. Without proper equipment, diagnosis was pure instinct and experience. Systematic poisoning, he murmured to himself. Something in the food or water. Supply. Kor's scarred face pressed against his own bars. You can fix this? Maybe. I need to test something first. Marcus had noticed that prisoners from certain sectors showed similar symptoms. If he was right, the hegemony was slowly poisoning specific species to make them more compliant. Over the next several days, Marcus began a careful investigation. He traded food rations for information, mapping which prisoners were fed from which dispensers. His medical training helped him recognize patterns that others missed, the subtle progression of symptoms, the way certain species were affected, while others remained healthy. When he was certain of his findings, Marcus made a choice that would define everything that followed. He refused to eat the standard rations, sharing his meager portions with the sickest prisoners instead. Within 48 hours, he was weak from hunger, but had identified the exact chemical compounds being used. The breakthrough came when he realized the poison was designed to suppress the natural regenerative abilities of several species, making them perfect for slave labor alive, but too weak to resist effectively. With this knowledge, he began teaching prisoners how to identify and neutralize the toxins using basic chemistry and materials found throughout the ship. Commander Vex, the ship's ruthless overseer, eventually noticed the change. Prisoners were working less efficiently but seemed more alert, more defiant. When his investigation led back to the human medic, he was both furious and intrigued. "You think you're clever, little healer," Vex hissed during Marcus's interrogation. His serpentine body coiled around the chair where Marcus sat, bound but unbroken. "You've cost me weeks of productivity." Marcus met his gaze steadily. "I've saved lives, that's what I do. Even when those lives belong to your enemies." "I don't see enemies, I see patients." Vex studied him with cold, calculating eyes. "You're either the most foolish creature I've ever encountered, or the most dangerous. Perhaps both." The interrogation lasted 3 days. Marcus endured pain that would have broken most beings, but he never revealed the full extent of his knowledge or the network of prisoners he'd organized. When Vex finally tired of his silence, he made a decision that would ripple across the galaxy. "You want to heal so badly? Fine, you'll have all the patience you can handle." Marcus was transferred to the ship's gladiatorial arena, where prisoners fought for the entertainment of their captors. His new role was simple: keep the fighters alive long enough to provide good sport. But Marcus had other plans. The gladiatorial arena aboard the Deathclaw was a testament to hegemony. Cruelty, a circular pit surrounded by energy barriers, where prisoners fought with primitive weapons while their captors wagered on the outcomes. Marcus's medical station was positioned at the arena's edge, close enough to treat the wounded, but far enough to avoid the worst of the violence. For the first few weeks, he simply did his job. He patched up sword wounds, set broken bones, and eased the passing of those too injured to save. But Marcus was observing, learning, understanding the rhythms of this hellish theater. The fighters came from dozens of species, each with unique physiology and fighting styles. There was Kess, a nimble Draknari whose poison glands had been surgically removed to prevent her from ending fights too quickly. Thane, a gentle mollusk giant who wept purple tears each time he was forced to harm another being. And Roth, the Craxi veteran whose fighting spirit had never been broken despite years of captivity. Marcus began to notice patterns in their injuries, weaknesses in their conditioning, opportunities for improvement. More importantly, he saw the despair in their eyes, the slow erosion of hope that made them easier to control. His first intervention was subtle. While treating a deep gash on Kess's arm, he whispered tactical advice. Your opponent favors his left side. The scar tissue there is weak. She won her next fight decisively, and word began to spread that the human medic saw things others missed. Soon, fighters were requesting Marcus's care not just for their wounds, but for strategy. He studied their opponents, identified weaknesses, and provided guidance that turned hopeless matches into victories. The crowds grew larger as fights became more unpredictable and exciting. Commander Vex noticed the change, but was pleased with the increased revenue. Your pet human has made the arena profitable again, one of his lieutenants reported. Perhaps we should reward him. But Marcus wasn't seeking rewards. He was building something far more valuable: trust, loyalty, and a growing network of survivors who saw him as more than just their medic. He became their confidant, their strategist, and eventually their leader. The transformation began in earnest when a new prisoner arrived, a young Terran soldier named Jake, who'd been captured during a border skirmish. Seeing another human gave Marcus new perspective on his situation. Here was someone who still believed in rescue, in hope, in the possibility of escape. We can't stay here forever, Jake whispered during their first private conversation. There has to be a way out. Marcus looked around the arena at the hundreds of prisoners who'd begun to look to him for guidance. Maybe, but not just for us. For all of them. Jake stared at him in disbelief. You're talking about a full-scale revolt. These ships have thousands of guards, military-grade weapons, planetary defense systems. It's suicide, so is staying here, Marcus replied quietly. But if we're going to die anyway, let's make it count. The planning began that night. Marcus used his access to the medical bay to map the ship's layout, identify security weaknesses, and catalog available resources. His network of fighters became his intelligence-gathering force, each one positioned to observe different aspects of ship operations. The breakthrough came when Marcus realized the arena's medical bay was connected to the ship's central computer system, a necessity for tracking prisoner health and fight outcomes. Using his medical access codes and some creative programming, he began to slice into the ship's databases. What he found there changed everything. The Deathclaw wasn't just a prison ship. It was part of a massive slave trading network that supplied labor for hegemony expansion across the galaxy. Thousands of ships like this one roamed the outer systems, capturing and breaking entire populations. But Marcus also found something else: shipping manifests, patrol routes, and communication protocols. The information he needed to plan not just an escape, but a strike that would cripple the entire operation. As the arena's lights dimmed and the ship settled into its night cycle, Marcus looked out at his fellow prisoners. They were no longer just patients to him. They were an army waiting to be born. And he was about to become their general. The rebellion began with silence. For 3 days, not a single fighter died in the arena. Marcus had coordinated the gladiators so perfectly that every match ended with strategic injuries painful enough to satisfy the bloodthirsty crowds, but not fatal. The hegemony guards grew suspicious, but profits remained high, so they allowed the unusual streak to continue. During those 3 days, Marcus's network expanded beyond the arena. Kitchen workers, maintenance crews, even some of the ship's lower-ranking guards began feeding information to the human medic who'd somehow become the unofficial leader of the Deathclaw's forgotten souls. The key to Marcus's plan was understanding the ship's hierarchical structure. The hegemony ruled through fear and isolation, keeping different species segregated and suspicious of each other. But Marcus had something they didn't expect: the universal language of healing. Every species understood the concept of mercy, of someone who helped without asking for anything in return. Jake remained skeptical of the growing movement. "You're asking maintenance workers and kitchen staff to take on trained soldiers," he argued during one of their clandestine meetings. "These people aren't warriors." "No," Marcus agreed, cleaning a minor cut on the young soldier's hand. "They're something better. They're people with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for." The plan Marcus had developed was audacious in its simplicity. Rather than a direct assault on the ship's command structure, he would turn the hegemony's own systems against them. The gladiatorial matches were broadcast throughout the ship for entertainment, and Marcus intended to use that network to coordinate a simultaneous uprising across all decks. The catalyst came when Commander Vex decided to stage a special event, a fight to the death between the ship's most popular gladiators for the entertainment of a visiting hegemony admiral. Marcus was ordered to ensure the fighters were in peak condition for what was intended to be a spectacular bloodbath. Instead, he saw an opportunity. "This is it," he told his inner circle as they gathered in the medical bay after hours. "Every eye on the ship will be watching the arena. Every guard will be focused on the main event. It's the perfect distraction." Kess flexed her regenerated poison glands. Marcus had secretly been helping her heal the surgical damage over months of careful treatment. "What do you need us to do?" "Win," Marcus said simply. "Win and survive long enough for the real fight to begin." The day of the special event, the arena was packed with off-duty guards and crew members. The visiting admiral sat in the place of honor, his scaled hide gleaming under the arena lights. Commander Vex stood beside him, confident in his control. Over the proceedings, the first matches went according to script: brutal, entertaining, profitable. But Marcus noticed details others missed: the positions of the guards, the timing of shift changes, the moment when attention would be most focused. On the arena floor, when Thane faced off against Roth in the evening's main event, Marcus gave the signal. A subtle gesture, barely visible, but every member of his network saw it. The revolution had begun. The fight in the arena was spectacular, two masters of combat displaying skills that awed even their captors. But it was also a carefully choreographed dance, each move calculated to maintain the illusion while allowing both fighters to survive. Meanwhile, throughout the ship, Marcus's people moved into action. Kitchen workers introduced fast-acting sedatives into the guards' meal supply. Maintenance crews disabled key security systems and locked down critical areas. Medical staff used their access codes to unlock detention cells and armories. The first sign of trouble came when the arena's energy barriers flickered and died. Commander Vex snarled in confusion, reaching for his communicator, only to find the ship's internal network had been compromised. Marcus stood up from his medical station, no longer hiding his role in the unfolding chaos. "Commander," he called out, his voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. "I believe it's time we renegotiated our arrangement." The gladiators in the arena had armed themselves with weapons from the medical bay, surgical tools that became deadly implements in trained hands. Around the viewing area, off-duty guards found themselves facing prisoners they'd thought were safely contained. But this wasn't a massacre. Marcus had been clear about that from the beginning. "We're not like them," he'd told his followers. "We fight to free ourselves, not to become monsters." The battle for the Deathclaw had begun, and the human medic who'd once saved lives with healing hands was about to discover he could save them with war as well. The revolution aboard the Deathclaw lasted 18 hours and transformed a medical station attendant into a legend that would echo through the galaxy for generations. When the ship's emergency lights bathed the corridors in crimson, Marcus Kane stood in the command center, no longer a prisoner but the unlikely leader of the largest successful rebellion in hegemony history. The final confrontation with Commander Vex had been inevitable. As Marcus's forces secured deck after deck, The Serpentine commander had retreated to the bridge with his most loyal guards. The battle there was fierce, but brief years of oppression had given the rebels a fury that military training couldn't match. "You think you've won something," Vex hissed as Marcus stood over him. The commander's own weapon pointed at his chest. "You're one ship among thousands. The hegemony will crush you." Marcus looked around the bridge at the faces surrounding him species. From across the galaxy, united by shared suffering and newfound hope. "Maybe, but they'll have to catch us first." The technical challenges of operating a hegemony vessel with a crew of former prisoners were immense, but Marcus had advantages the original crew lacked. His people fought with the desperation of beings who knew capture meant death, and they had something the hegemony forces didn't: intimate knowledge of how the ship really worked. Maintenance crews who'd been ignored by their captors knew every weakness, every hidden passage, every system that could be modified or improved. Under Marcus's guidance, they transformed the Deathclaw from a prison ship into something unprecedented. Mobile base of operations dedicated to liberating other vessels in the slave trade network. The arena became a training facility where former prisoners learned to fight not for entertainment, but for freedom. Jake, initially skeptical of the rebellion, became Marcus's tactical advisor. "You realize we've just painted a target on ourselves," he pointed out during their first staff meeting in the liberated command center. "Every hegemony ship in the sector will be hunting us." "Good," Marcus replied, studying the stellar charts that showed the locations of other prison ships. "That means they'll be spread thin, easier to defeat individually." What followed was a campaign that military historians would later call the Medics War, a series of lightning strikes against hegemony vessels that seemed impossible, but succeeded through a combination of precise intelligence, innovative tactics, and the unstoppable momentum of desperate hope. Marcus's reputation grew with each victory. Former prisoners spoke of the human doctor who'd learned to wage war with the same precision he'd once used to heal. Enemy commanders began to fear encounters with the ship whose crew fought with fanatical dedication to their unlikely leader. Transformation was complete when they encountered the hegemony battleship Worldrender, a massive vessel that outgunned the Deathclaw by orders of magnitude. Marcus's advisors urged retreat, but he'd received intelligence that Tyla, his old colleague from the medical station, was aboard as a prisoner. "We can't win this fight," Kess warned during the battle planning session. "That ship has enough firepower to destroy us before we get within boarding range." Marcus studied the tactical display, his mind working through possibilities with the same methodical approach he'd once used for medical diagnosis. "We're not going to fight it. We're going to cure it." The battle plan he devised was unlike anything in recorded military history. Instead of attacking the Worldrender's weapons or engines, Marcus targeted its crew. Using knowledge gained from months of studying hegemony physiology and psychology, he unleashed a coordinated assault on the ship's life support, food systems, and environmental controls. The Deathclaw danced around the larger vessel like a surgeon's scalpel, making precise cuts that seemed insignificant individually but created cascading system failures throughout the enemy ship. Within hours, the Worldrender's crew was dealing with atmospheric poisoning, equipment failures, and the psychological pressure of fighting an enemy who seemed to anticipate their every move. When the boarding actions began, Marcus led from the front, not with the fury of a conqueror, but with the calm precision of a doctor treating a disease. He moved through the enemy ship's corridors with practiced efficiency, his team neutralizing resistance with minimal casualties on both sides. Reunion with Tala in the Worldrender's detention center was emotional but brief. "I told you the galaxy needed more healers," she said, tears streaming down her face as Marcus cut through her restraints. "It turns out," Marcus replied, helping her to her feet, "sometimes healing requires a different kind of medicine." As the liberated Worldrender joined his growing fleet, Marcus looked out at the stars and saw not the vast emptiness he'd once feared, but infinite possibilities. The medic who'd been left behind had become something unprecedented, a faceted healer who'd learned to cure oppression itself. The galaxy would never be the same, and neither would the quiet human doctor who discovered that sometimes the greatest act of healing was teaching others to fight for their right to live. The legend of the medic god of war had begun, and across 1,000 worlds, beings in chains would hear his name and dare to hope for freedom.